In this video, I'll be ranking the genetics of the top 20 classic physique competitors who are qualified for the 2025 Mr. Olympia. I ranked classic physique genetics a little while ago, but with new faces in the mix and old names gone, I thought that I would redo my list. By genetics, I'm talking about things like aesthetics, proportion, muscle insertion, structure, and to a lesser extent conditioning and the ability to gain size. Also, when I say the top 20 bodybuilders, I mean the top 20 competitors who I think have the best potential to place very well at the 2025 Mr. Olympia. For the tiers, S plus is for near perfect genetics with only minor non-important flaws. These are for the most optimal genetics when it comes to shape, proportion, muscle insertion, and structure. And then you have S tier, which is for amazing all-rounder genetics that have some small flaws that can be overcome, but can also be slightly problematic, but in my opinion, not really deal-breaking for high placing. A tier is for good genetics with a few small flaws, and maybe one more noticeable problematic one that can impact placings. B tiers for average genetics that have a handful of major and minor issues, but the overall package can come together well, I would say, and with hard work, it can definitely look pretty good. Finally, C tiers for genetics that are considered below average with major flaws that can prevent high placings, but regardless, the bodybuilder has outworked them to even make it into this video and can place very highly even with bad genetics. Also, I do want to say that relative to the average person, none of these genetics are truly bad and represent the very top percent of people when it comes to bodybuilding genetics. Starting things off is Michael Dool. He's always shredded, polished on stage, and one of the hardest workers in the division, but genetically he does not really stack up to the top guys. His clavicles are not very wide, his waist is not that small, and his overall frame doesn't give him that dramatic V-taper that, in my opinion, defines the division's best. His insertions are also about average. The lats sit a little bit high from behind, the arms do not have standout peaks or shape, and the quads do lack impressive sweep. The reason he's still competitive is due to his condition and density, which let him beat athletes with far better frames. Still, against the best in the world, the lack of width and flow is very obvious. For that reason, I would have Michael, unfortunately, in C tier. He's a very hard worker, don't get that wrong, or twisted at all, who definitely maximizes literally everything, but genetically, I would definitely say his ceiling is lower. And while he has definitely carved out a very impressive career, he will always be at a disadvantage when it comes to comparisons against the genetic elite. Next is Alex Camberero. Genetically, Alex has one of the most balanced physiques in the division. His clavicles are wide enough to give him a very impressive frame, his waist is very tight, and his X-frame shows through in every single front pose. His insertions are also very clean across the board, giving him flow and proportion. His arm insertions in particular are absolutely outstanding, with great round fullness and perfect shape. His abs also tie in pretty nicely with his physique, and his legs match well with the upper body, especially from the front. In my opinion, the one flaw I can point to for certain would be the higher lat insertions, which have been made worse over time when it comes to the nerve issues he's dealing with. He also doesn't have that one dramatic wow factor feature, but everything ties together nicely into a refined look that was, at one point, very competitive. For me, Alex Camberero definitely belongs in S tier. He's a physique built on amazing genetics that has great balance and proportion, and even today he still holds up with his age, and his genetics have definitely kept him competitive against younger, flashier athletes, although I do think his competitive days are coming to a close. Now we have Mike Somerfeld. He's about as genetically gifted as it gets in this division. His clavicles are wide, his waist is small, and his arms and quads flow perfectly into a crazy X-frame. To me, his true standout feature, though, would be the back. It has near-perfect lower lat insertions, great width thanks to his wide shoulders, and wide structure as well, and overall amazing aesthetic shape. Overall, he does carry a crazy amount of density for his frame and for his height, and everything ties together cleanly from every angle. His only real weakness, I would say, are the slightly less peaked biceps and a lack of deep intra-arm separation frontally, but I would say that those are kind of nitpicks. Funny as it seems, I have speculated that his bone structure may be unusually light, which would explain how he can pack on so much density at his height and weight cap, though others do point to a controversy surrounding his true height and measurements, which probably is more true. Regardless, what we do see on stage and what we have seen is a physique that looks complete and very dominant. All in all, Mike is definitely S+ tier. He's one of the most genetically gifted athletes in the division when it comes to mass, and I think if he continues to refine his presentation, he could cement a very dominant legacy. Now we get to Nile Darwin, and his genetics are straight up incredible. He's got a wide-looking upper body, an extremely small waist, and long sweeping quads that make the perfect X-frame. His arms are also full and round, his chest ties in smoothly, and his abs stay tight in every pose, whether in a vacuum or crunched down. He also has that rare combination of mass and aesthetics that only the best of the best genetics can really pull off. The only genetic flaw is that his clavicles are kind of narrow, which would usually be a massive issue, but in this case, his tiny waist and big flowing limbs hide it almost completely. Apart from that, there is almost nothing else to point out genetically. In my opinion, his physique already looks like a Mr. Olympia caliber type of look, and if he fills it out even more, I'm sure he will only get better in placings and overall look. For me, that makes Nile clearly an S+ tier competitor when it comes to genetics. He's one of the most complete blueprints in Classic, and I think fans will quickly see him as a future contender for the Mr. Olympia title in this division, even if it does not happen this year, solely due to his crazy shoulder-to-waist ratio, amazing X-frame, and perfect proportions. Up next is Horse MD. His strengths are clear. His legs have some of the best shape and insertion in the division, with massive sweeping quads, well-developed hamstrings, and even good calf insertions. His biceps are also very impressive, probably a trademark part of his frontal silhouette, and his abs and midsection insertions are very impressive and pretty underrated. When he's conditioned, he looks absolutely shredded, which makes his muscles pop even more, although he does struggle when it comes to bringing that really sharp condition and peaking right. But structurally, his genetics do hold him back a lot. His waist is extremely wide, and in my opinion, his clavicles are not broad enough to balance that out. His back insertions are also not that ideal, which also can limit his taper and flow, and his chest seems to be a real genetic issue, with no sharpness or really mass either. The result is a physique that looks more blocky than aesthetic compared to the very top tier, at least in my own opinion. Even so, he's a very big powerhouse with a lot of fan support, and I would have him in B tier because of all that. He's a very exciting bodybuilder with insane legs, but not the classic structure the division rewards. With his work ethic though, he will always be a tough one to beat, and also if you guys are enjoying the video so far, like and sub would really be awesome, as it helps out the channel tremendously. Next is Logan Franklin. He's got great overall symmetry and proportion, with some of the best ab insertions in the division and very nice bicep insertions as well. His lines are very clean and his shape is always very pleasing frontally, but when you look closer, some genetic flaws do start to show. From the back, his lats sit a bit higher than ideal, which can weaken his taper, and his quads could have been a little bit better when it comes to the outer quad insertion, and his wider hips combined with only about average clavicle width take away from the X-frame potential. That said, his waist is still small, but those hips are hard to overlook in this division. Another concern that I have is that he hasn't really fully filled out his weight cap, and even now he tends to look a lot smaller compared to the top guys, which might point to a genetic limit in how much size he can add. Still, his balance and flow are very impressive, among the best in the division, and his aesthetics are among the best as well. For me, I would say that Logan fits in that A tier. He's a great physique with a lot of upside, but structural flaws that hold him back in my own opinion when it comes to the very best genetics in this entire division. Now we have Diego Galindo. He's one of the most genetically gifted athletes in this lineup, with insane back insertions, crazy width, and dense muscle that makes him stand out right away. His clavicles are pretty wide, his quads are massive and very nicely inserted, and his midsection is tight enough to make that taper look extreme, and also has pretty good insertions in the midsection as well. His biceps are also excellent, giving him a peaked and impressive look in the arms from the front. That said, the weaknesses are smaller but still noticeable. His triceps, for example, could be a lot longer, his forearms are a bit short and lanky, and his shorter frame makes him look more compact compared to the very top guys. Those details keep him from having the same flowing, stretched out look as an S+ tier athlete. Still, his taper, width, and density put him well above most. For me, Diego is definitely an S-tier competitor. He's loaded with gifts but just shy of the absolute best. Moving on, we have Branch Chen, who is one of the most aesthetic athletes in Classic, with great proportion and flow that really pop from almost every angle. His front shots are incredible, wide quads, a tight waist, and a very good X-frame that gives him instant wow factor. His muscle insertions are also all very full and round, especially in the arms, quads, and delts, and the quads are specifically really impressive and might be among the best in the division when it comes to both development and insertion. From the back, his lats do have nice insertion, but his slightly narrow structure and also underdeveloped lats make him look less wide than you would expect. From the side, his hamstring drop also is not that dramatic, and that can hurt the balance of his overall silhouette. Still, when he nails his condition, his physique comes alive, and all the positives are magnified. The only real structural knock would be those clavicles, which are not really as wide as the other competitors, but overall, I would definitely still put Branch in that S tier because his physique is so impressive. Even with that clavicle issue, it's barely an issue, at least in my opinion, and the quads and everything else, those full muscle bellies and the crazy proportions really bring him up in my opinion. Next, we come to Fabian Meyer, who has a very impressive structure with good width up top and a clean taper and silhouette frontally. I would say that his arms have pretty good proportion and insertion, his quads are round with great sweep, and his delts are full and well separated, giving him a balanced look in most mandatories. But that bigger frame can work against him. The longer arms can make him look a bit lanky, and from the back, his lats do sit considerably higher up, leaving his lower back look underwhelming and hurting his overall width. He's also got some subtle quirks in his physique, like a ribcage asymmetry when he pulls a vacuum, and proportions between his legs and torso that don't really flow perfectly. And what I mean by that is that I think his femurs could have been a little bit longer. Those little details take away from that X factor you'd expect in a top-tier classic physique, but still, he's very competitive and his strengths are undeniable, but the higher lats and lack of standout proportion keep him in A tier for me. He's very good, don't get me wrong, but not quite in the elite group in my own opinion. Now let's move on to Matt Grego, a competitor who's quickly made a name for himself thanks to his standout structure. He's got great balance and proportion with longer limbs that flow nicely and are filled out well, especially in the quads and arms. His clavicle to waist ratio is also very balanced, giving him a good X-frame and taper that immediately grabs your attention. Of course, there are some areas that do hold him back. His back insertions, for one, are a bit shallow, the lats do not drop very low, which leaves his lower back looking empty, and the lack of development does not really help either. His hamstrings, I would say, are also genetically weaker, with the insertions not really popping as much as his quads, and then some might point to the longer arm insertions as a flaw, but in reality they fit his frame well and have not really hurt his presentation in my own opinion. Add in a clean midsection with good ab insertions, and Matt has one of the most impressive genetic bases in this division. For me, that makes him a clear S tier. He's an athlete with amazing elite genetics who still needs some refinement in a few key areas to really be competitive at the very, very top. Up next is Bion Aninsley, one of the most accomplished names in the division, and his strengths are obvious. His triceps are solid and the biceps are some of the best in Classic, and his back insertions are also excellent, and he's known for always showing up shredded. His abs are well inserted even if they don't really quite present ideally, and his upper body as a whole really flows well thanks to clean muscle bellies and insertions all over. The drawbacks mainly come from his structure and lower body. His waist is not extremely small, when not in a vacuum specifically, and his clavicles are not the widest, which can limit his overall taper. The bigger issue, though, would definitely be the quads. The outer sweep was never dramatic and has only gotten worse with age, making his legs look very lackluster compared to the upper body. That contrast holds him back when lined up against today's taller and freakier physiques, especially downstairs. To me, Bion definitely represents the earlier era of Classic. Good structure, great arms and back, and work ethic that carried him to 2 Mr. Olympia titles. But against the new wave of genetic standouts, he does not really have that same edge. That's why I'd place him in A tier. He's a strong physique with a lot of standout genetic parts, but also some flaws, and he's not really quite on that modern genetic level of the division today. Here we have a true fan favorite, Raone Dino. He's quickly become one of the faces of the division, and it is very easy to see why. His structure is simply outstanding. Wide clavicles, a very tiny waist, long full muscle insertions, and incredible arms that bring that instant wow factor. His abs are sharp and well inserted, his taper is clean, and his overall flow from top to bottom is about as ideal as you could hope for in this division. Genetically, there are very few weaknesses though. His lats do insert slightly higher from both the front and rear, which can limit how dramatic his taper looks from both angles, and some critics point to his elongated torso as kind of a flaw, but in reality that does not really take much away from the total physique he brings, especially because his proportion and balance are so impressive. With the fullness, roundness, and near-perfect presentation of the physique, I'm not talking about posing, since we all know that could be much better, Raone is definitely, though, one of the most gifted athletes in the division today. For me, that places him firmly in S+ tier. He's a very complete physique with only tiny nitpicks keeping him from being absolutely flawless. Now we have Andrea Mamole, who errs on the aesthetic side of competitors with solid balance and pleasing proportions across the board. He's got great arms, well-shaped legs, and he's known for bringing deep shredded condition, especially in his most recent showings. His vacuum is actually one of the best in the division, with a really wide and broad rib cage, which makes his front poses really pop. But structurally, there are some limitations that hold him back. His clavicles are definitely on the narrow side, and his waist is also not the smallest ever, despite his amazing vacuum, so when he's not pulling that, he can't really create a very dramatic V-taper when you see him against the very top guys. From the back, his lats sit higher up and don't spread particularly wide, which leaves him looking kind of compact, even though the insertions and lower back detail themselves are pretty solid. He also still needs to add more overall size to compete with the bigger names, and I think with more time, he will definitely look a lot better. That said, his presentation, condition, and flow give him a lot of upside. With more time, he will keep improving, like I said, but the structural width gap is always going to be a big limiting factor. For that reason, I would place him in A tier. He's aesthetic and polished, but without the frame to push into the elite. Next is Livingston Lavinho, who is newer to the scene, but his genetics already stand out as some of the best in the division. His shape is incredible, wide clavicles, long limbs, dramatic taper into a tiny waist, and then flaring back out into massive quads. Basically the ideal front shot. The arms and legs have great fullness and insertions as well, and from the front, his lats are round and bulbous, giving him that insane X-frame and really contributing to that wow factor silhouette. He does have a couple of kind of minor flaws, I would say. His chest insertions are not the most impressive, and his lats could be a little bit lower, but honestly, like I said, those are very minor issues. His back looks more like it needs more size rather than being limited by weak insertion, and with more time, that's something he can definitely refine. What really matters is that his flow, structure, proportions, and insertions overall are on another planet. For me, Livingston is clearly S plus tier. He's a competitor with a lot of shape potential and already a lot of great shape, and I think with more time, he will be a very hard competitor to deal with on stage because of how good his genetics really are. Moving on, we have Terrence Ruffin. Now, he is one of the most polished and refined physiques we've ever seen in Classic, and he's also one of the last original competitors. His balance is excellent, his insertions are clean, and he consistently brings great detail and condition. Now, his legs are also very solid, and his back is also pretty good as well. Both are underrated even, and his overall flow and proportion give him a physique that always looks very put together. That said, he doesn't really have one standout wow factor body part. His arms, especially the triceps, are definitely weaker compared to the rest of his body, and his frame is on the smaller side. In side poses, he can get outmassed by guys with more raw size, and while his back does have pretty good low lat insertion, it isn't the most dense or overwhelming when it comes to mass. The detail and sharp conditioning are good, and don't get me wrong, it makes his back look very nice, but the overall density is not there, and that's not really genetics, but genetics does contribute to that as well. So, while Terrence is not the most structurally gifted competitor out there, his refinement, balance, and presentation, proportions, and aesthetics as well keep him near the top. For me, that earns him a spot easily in S tier, a physique with amazing genetics overall, just not really the most extreme genetic talent compared to the absolute elite. Up next is Jose Manuel, and he is one of the most unique physiques in the division because of how much he can bring in certain areas. His back insertions are excellent, his ab insertions are also very nice and clean and kind of underrated, and he might have the best hamstrings in the entire division with how perfectly they insert and how developed they actually are. Add to that round delts, a wider upper body, and the ability to come in with some of the best gnarly condition, grainy, dry, hard condition in the sport, and you see why people talk about his potential. But the flaws are noticeable and obvious. His waist is extremely wide, and no amount of posing can completely hide it. Combine that with quads that lack outer sweep, and his front poses lose balance against the top-tier genetic elite. He can look very impressive from the side or back, but structurally those weaknesses up front always show through. So while Jose is incredibly gifted in conditioning and in certain muscle groups as well, that wide waist and the flat quads are genetic flaws that really cap his ceiling. For me, that puts him in B tier. He's a very impressive bodybuilder in the right pose, with a lot of standout strengths when you see him at the right angle, but also a competitor who cannot overcome his structural limitations. Now we have Pota Voytovich, and he's one of the most exciting newcomers in this division, and his front shots show exactly why. He's got a dramatic X-frame with a tiny waist, a wide upper body, and enough fullness in those arms and quads and a tight enough midsection to create a very complete look. His conditioning is also already very good, with sharp detail that really highlights his proportion, and a good amount of fullness as well when it comes to peaking right to really make that physique pop. Still, there are some areas that do need a lot of work. His lats do insert genetically a bit higher, which leaves the lower back looking empty, and this is made even more obvious by the fact that he also has not fully developed that area. His clavicles are also not extremely wide, though the small waist creates a strong illusion of width from the front, and they are not incredibly narrow either, I would say. Aesthetically, some might say his shape is not the cleanest compared to the most gifted guys with amazing flowing lines, but in my opinion, he has all the tools to grow into a real threat, and he has good enough aesthetics to really get the job done, as well as a lot of wow factor as well. Overall, I would say that his genetics are very strong, and most of his weaknesses can be fixed with more size and maturity. That's why I would have him in S tier. He's a newcomer with huge positives who already looks good on the very best stages. Second to last is Medagachi. He's a really interesting physique to evaluate because he's got some clear strengths alongside some structural flaws. On the plus side, his quads are excellent. They're full round and a big part of why his front poses really flow. He's also got solid abs, I would say, insertions-wise, well-shaped arms, and overall a great flow that gives him a competitive look. That said, there are some definite weaknesses. His clavicles are definitely narrow, which limits how wide and dramatic his frame can be. His chest insertions are also a bit shallow, and his back insertions could be a lot better, which holds him back compared to the most genetically gifted athletes in this division, and the lack of chest and back development also holds him back as well. Even so, Mateus manages to pull together a very balanced package, and his shape overall has that classic appeal. For me, that makes him a solid S-tier bodybuilder. He's not flawless structurally, but he has a very good set of legs, a great set of arms, good overall flow, and I think he has that balance and wow factor that reminds me of a tinier, kind of younger Chris Bumstead, if you will, that will keep him in the mix against the top competition. Finally, we have Hune Park, who brings a very distinct look to the stage, and his best feature by far genetically and developmentally would be his legs. His quad insertions are some of the best in the division, full, sweeping, and with a kind of roundness and detail that immediately draws your attention. His midsection is also pretty well put together, and he reliably comes in sharp, showing great condition every single time he competes. Where he falls short, though, is in his structure. His clavicles are definitely narrow, which limits his width and makes his already average arms look a little bit less impressive as well. Not to mention the arms also have kind of underwhelming insertion. His back insertions are also only mediocre, I would say, and the narrow frame accentuates that weakness from behind. His shape overall is not the most striking, and while his quads do a lot to balance that out, they can only carry him so far against the very top. Still, with his lower body potential when it comes to overall mass, size, and wow factor, as well as insertions, as well as the condition, Hune is no doubt a very solid bodybuilder. For me, that would put him in B tier, I would say, competitor with standout legs and sharp detail, but not the structure or insertion to break into that genetic elite. Well guys, that about does it for this video. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I would love to hear your thoughts and opinions down below. With that all being said, I'll see you all in the next one. Thanks for watching.